It's not that private equity have a shortage of ideas, it's more of a production problem. So there is a tougher question behind all of this, which is where does AI actually make it into production and what is that measurable value?
What's really hard is to actually see that within the holding period of time, within the investment horizon that we're looking in, to actually get that value, that estimated value into production, to see it appear in the P&L. And that's where it has to matter at the end. We need to not look at what AI can do, but first look at the economics that the company has. What matters most for an investor as well as for the portfolio company is how can I create my defense strategy? How can I make my moat that I might have stronger? And these, I think, are the starting points that you need rather than looking, where could AI possibly help us on?
Hello everybody, my name is Alex Rumble. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at HTEC. And as with many other industries in private equity, AI is firmly on the board agenda. But conversation tend to stall at opportunity and discovery and prioritization. So it's not that private equity have a shortage of ideas, it's more of a production problem. So most firms can identify attractive initiatives, but fewer can get them into production fast enough to actually matter economically within the whole period. So there is a tougher question behind all of this, which is where does AI actually make it into production and what is that measurable value? Now, to have that conversation today, I'm joined by Ronny Fehling. Ronny, thank you very much for joining us. Ronny is HTEC Chief AI Transformation Officer. And let me just go straight into the topic, Ronny. Everyone is talking about the value that AI can deliver to private equity right now, but what do you think that the firms are still finding the most challenging?
Well, I think right now, a lot of the focus is really on trying to find what are the right use cases that we want to put in, really focusing on identifying use case opportunities. But I think what's really hard is to actually see that within the holding period of time, within the investment horizon that we're looking in, to actually get that value, that estimated value into production, to see it appear in the P&L. And that's where it has to matter at the end. And an investment company looks at the multiples that it can achieve on that. So you need to see how the baseline differs with the value creation that you can achieve through AI. So while I think a lot of time is spent on trying to see, what is the right AI initiative, what are the use cases that we can do, the focus needs to be on where can we get that into production and see the effect in production within the time that we have.
So the private equity firms have ideas, they know how to prioritize, but not how to execute. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. And I think it's both the PE's role and the portfolio company's role to know how to allocate the right amount of capital management attention to those opportunities, and then to be able to get them where they matter most. So I think we need to not look at what AI can do, but first look at the economics that the company has. Mainly looking into the core. A lot of focus was before on costs and efficiency of AI. What matters most for an investor as well as for the portfolio company is how can I create my defense strategy? How can I make my moat that I might have stronger? How can I increase my margin? How can I increase my revenue capture? How can I grow the market? And these, I think, are the starting points that you need rather than looking, where could AI possibly help us on?
Right. So let's shift to value more specifically, because you often talk about value levers instead of use cases. Now, I remember a year ago, use cases was everything that everybody was talking about. If you had a use case, you would say, that's not really the fact. So why is that distinction so important?
The distinction is so important because the use cases is quite easily to find. It is just, where does it matter for you? On some of the efficiency part, I think there are some table stakes that you have to do in order to achieve a certain amount of productivity. But what matters most is where do you actually have your economics in your business? So is it production quality? Is it the cost to serve? Is this the margin improvement? Is this the pricing elements? And then, so those are the value levers that we know that AI can move. And you should start from there and then seeing, can AI help boost these? And what do you have the ambition that it can boost at which amount of quality and amount of quantity? And that is your ambition that you should have. And then compare this with the execution capability or the friction that exists in order to achieve that.
So tell me, where is it that in your conversation you see companies starting? So it's obviously not as simple as that, but it makes complete sense when I'm hearing it. But in your conversation, you can clearly see that they're not starting at that point. So where are they starting and why are they failing at that?
I mean, there are some that start at the proof of concept. We're fortunately already past that with a large extent of companies, but the proof of concept is mostly to see, does this work? Does the technology work? And I think that is fundamentally the wrong point, because you don't think about production at that moment. You're trying to prove that the technology works, or you're trying to see, can this possibly work? In the best case, you still don't know how to bring that into production, and you don't know if that investment of time and money are actually worth it. The next step is often the proof of value, which is already better formulated, where you say, this is the ambition that we have, and we actually build something with change management in mind to see that, if we do it this way, yes, it can work on that. That is much, much stronger, but it still oftentimes does not see the light of production. And the reason for it is that production reality, especially in complex and regulated industries, and in the core functions, are harder to change at scale, especially, than one thinks so. The definition of the kind of requirements that an AI project needs at the beginning, at the value stage, are different from those that software typically has. It's more deterministic. The AI is more probabilistic. It learns in production. It learns through change on that. So we see that most of the projects then die at that stage and don't see that they go into production.
So when you talk about production, you're talking about it going into the mainstream business effectively, so being deployed across the organization. Now, there's a point you made earlier that I'd love to just come back to it just for a second before we move on, which is this: you've mentioned the word time several times, and that's because the time cycle to see the ROI is incredibly long when it comes to PE firm, and some of that has to do with the phases that they go through, the offense and the defense phase, for example. What's the role of AI within those particular areas? And as a follow-up question, I'd love to understand, what is an expected timeline in terms of getting some ROI?
Good points. I think the offense and defense is probably the least understood right now in the AI horizon, especially with Gen AI coming in. I think the defense strategy is one of the most important one operationally to get it right. This protects your current moat, this protects your standing, this protects your margin, and is a requirement step. It's what I often call the operational excellence that you need to achieve on this. But you can't stop with that. In almost all industries, we see that there's a threat of value chain compression, commoditization of legacy models. They're the newcomers, which are not necessarily your old competitors, but ones that inject themselves into the value chain, typically more higher up, and push you down. So that requires an offensive strategy. You need to think about how do you position yourself in, let's say, in an agentic world into this new changed value chain mode. And those are different horizons.
Right.
So the defensive strategy is the horizon that you need to achieve within 1-2 years.
Right.
Whereas the offensive strategy is something that you probably need to experiment more. You need to start right away, but you need to try to see and hunt for those signals that could be relevant with regards to your value destruction on this. Your question about what is the typical horizon, I think it's a really, really important question that needs to be both coordinated by the PE and the portfolio company, because they might not see always eye to eye on that. There are certain levers that we know that can be achieved within 1 year or even 6 months, although typically a P&L cycle will take that 1 year. You have to have a baseline on that, and then you show that with AI, you can crack that through. I think sometimes what makes it difficult, you need to ride both waves, so the short, medium term and the medium, long term strategy. The medium, long term strategy might be to get a better data foundation there, which we know takes 2 to 3 years.
Absolutely.
And by itself does not provide value.
No.
And this is, I think, where one has to see, okay, if we want to achieve the actual value within 1 year, we need to have some of the other levers that can sometimes be deployed pragmatically, does not achieve necessarily the precision that you need for the complete foundation, but that can gain quick wins within 1 year.
So you've talked about portfolio, and I had a question a little bit later on, but since we've talked about it, what's the dynamic between the private equity firm and the portfolio companies when it comes to value creation and AI?
I think the dynamic that has to be handled, the PE has certain interests for the assets to mature, to have a multiple, and to be resold again, whereas the portfolio company has their interest to create a sustainable and growing business on this. So how do these two come together? I think what the PE can and should do is especially around the capital and the asset allocation that you want to focus within the right time frame. So to be able to say, these are the things that we need to prioritize because we know that they determine the multiples, they determine the investor interest, and they need to be able to be proven. And for the portfolio company, they will have to put it into operations. And that has and will always be like that. So to balance these short-term pressure points to see that we can be results driven, at the same time laying the foundations for example, the offense strategy, as well as laying some of the foundations to make sure that you don't fall behind with regards to your tech debt, etc. These are longer term investments that do not necessarily translate directly into a P&L value.
So the dependency on using AI in the right way, defining those timelines, the value creation, the different phases within PE and the dynamics between PE and portfolios. There's a part of me that thinks that there needs to be a lot of talent within those organizations and understanding of AI, but clearly that's not always the case. So what about partnerships in terms of those organizations partnering with someone like HTEC, for example? How is that needed? What value does it bring? And does it help accelerate any of it?
Yeah, it's, I think, very important. And one has to look at the business and their priorities that they have currently. So do you need an AI team if you're a non-tech company, for example? Probably not. It's also very difficult to attract that talent to work in you. And the question always remains, what is your position now and tomorrow on that? What do you need to achieve it? And oftentimes, I think the goal is, you can use a consultative approach to define the strategy, but you do need to bring the rubber to the road to have it, as we say so often, into production. Now, the production system, if it's integrated into your operations, then you might switch into maintenance mode on that.
Right.
If the mode, your new differentiator, is really the technology, you probably need to build that muscle internally as well. So I think a partnership with companies like HTEC can serve two purposes, or actually three. One is to de-risk knowing where do we need to go and how we might define our ambition, but how fast can we validate if we're going the right direction, or more importantly, if we pull the kill switch, if we see we have achieved a failure mode, we're saying that we can't get past this point, so we need to pull the plug. And this, I think, is often very difficult for companies to say, let's put several people on it, and what if we see that it doesn't work?
Absolutely.
Or we need fewer or more people. So the first stage is really helping to de-risk that kind of validation. The second one is to figure out how much do you need to get it into production? And as we said, that's where most of it fails. So if you have the proof of value in there, it's oftentimes, in my experience, does not work afterwards to say, okay, now, let's create an organizational structure and hire some people and have it done. We see in today's market, and also because production is so much different than the AI value creation, that typically doesn't work. So the partnership can extend in certain situations very, very long on that, which is mutually beneficial, especially if it's regarding the core. I think if it's the non-core, it's certainly not it is traditional make versus buy decision. In the core, it is not make or buy in the terms of traditional do we do it. I think it's built, yes, but who's helping me build it? I think it's smart to look at partners, as long as, of course, the IP stays with you.
Yes, 100%. And I'm sensing that in some of the answers that you're giving me, that there is merit in starting small and being very focused in terms of what it is that you're trying to create. So I'm sensing there's a little bit of skepticism in terms of, strategy first AI program. Am I right in picking this up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I started talking about what I call now these production slices.
Yes, correct.
Because the strategy, directionally, you can get it right fast, I think, but what is important is to choose a bounded element of initiative that really uses real data, the real production environment, the real workflows, the real owners as well, and the real value metrics that you have in order to show not on paper, well, kind of, but really into the P&L, yes, that works. So bounded means it's realistic enough or it's real in the slice of what I'm doing currently, and at the same time does not overburden, I think, the amount of functionality and being an AI transformation program of that kind. But then knowing, once you have it in production, what needs to be put in place additionally in terms of governance, in terms of operating model, etc., to make it scalable.
And talking of governance is important, but what else is important beyond governance?
Well, I think it's the governance is a very crucial step in order to make AI safely in a production environment. It is often deployed quite prematurely to define policies without having key learnings in the organization. So if you put governance at the wrong time, so if you start with governance, you risk oftentimes to slow down initiative with policy decisions that are obviously risk adverse on this. And yet, without knowledge if that is actually relevant, you are slowing down significantly any kind of capability. So I think the importance that you need to get right into the governance model, or rather than the governance model, is that you have the senior leadership hunt for these signals, that we have the openness and the agility using a small production slice, as I mentioned, to actually validate if we get the signal that is working, and then afterwards building the structure, the operating model, the governance around it. So I think it's first this ambition setting, the agreement on the ambitions, and then working, I say often backwards into these stage gates, saying if you achieve them, and being able therefore to de-risk your investment early on by saying we don't see a path beyond this gate, and therefore we're stopping it.
So how should firms think about AI and what should they avoid doing? So if there are people listening here, and they're thinking about what should we do in our first 90 days, what would you recommend?
We don't need to hunt for use cases on this. So I think starting with, what could AI first do for us is the wrong way to go. I think what investors and the company needs to think about first is where are our value contributors, where are our value destructors that we have right now? Where is our differentiator? Where is our right to play? What are the economics that drive our company? And then see if AI can help overcome them or boost some of them on a material level. And I think that is the first sort of decision pointing that you need to put into place, and then identify, the bounded production slice initiatives to actually see if they are realizable.
So following on from that, what separates the firms who are really following that approach and creating value from the ones who just talk about it?
It is probably those that don't use AI as a technology, but that understand that AI can help them in their defense strategy and ideally also leverage the AI knowledge, the experimentation, to position themselves into an AI-first world as an offensive strategy. I think it is less thinking about the technology because that is changing. It's oftentimes not the model quality that will make or break, but we do see that if you quickly hand it off to let's try it out, that the governance either slows it down or it dies off, because later on you see that when the reality hits, you don't think about it. Sometimes companies underestimate the amount of effort and money it takes to put something into production. Right. So when the reality hits, that hurts a lot. Sometimes they underestimate the complexity of the production requirements, because AI can produce so quick results, and you get to 60%, let's say, and you say, well, I got within 60% of the right thing within 2 weeks. So, put another 4 weeks and I'll get to 100. Yes. And I think that's the fundamental difference of learnings through AI, because of its different way of operating, that getting from a 60% right solution to a 100% right solution is pretty much impossible. And if you try to say, well, we would put the cutoff point at 95% of accuracy in the ROC curve, that also doesn't work, because oftentimes the difference is either I have 100% determinism or reliability through humans, or I have nothing. Yes. So I think the automation debate is also a very difficult one, where we're trying to say, let's take the processes that we have and just automate them all, versus let's try to use AI to rethink how we can do not only the processes, but how we create the value. Yes, absolutely. And you spend a lot of time talking to customers and prospects at HTEC, and particularly in private equity. Are you hearing, I'd love to understand what they are looking for from a partner like HTEC, and if you're hearing some, common themes of what those expectations might be. There are now emerging several of them. I think in PE there's a shift that is happening. On one side, AI was firmly a interesting capability that has developed and causing a lot of opportunities of use cases within the portfolio companies, but it was their responsibility. Right. Now we see a big fear actually happening, because some PE companies, especially with regards to tech companies or a SaaS business model, which sounded very attractive for a while, now they're thinking that AI will eat SaaS. And I think both sides are not quite right on this. So what a lot of PE firms are looking for is like, what is really there for us in terms of opportunity or survival threat on this. And I think, again, it's not always black and white on this, but I think to help navigate saying, like, you have to do something here. And the difference between, this can help you increase your margin versus if you don't act here, the company might not survive. I think those are the first guidance steps, and where to put their attention to within their broad portfolio. I think it is not about creating the roadmap, but creating a decision point for the PE to be saying, this is what we need to take serious on this. And then aligning that with the operational reality of the portfolio company to be able to say, okay, how do we put it into place? How can we quickly allocate this? Who's financing which part of this journey? On the one side, the value comes really for the decision, for the decisioning of where to allocate capital from the PE.
Yes.
But the implementation then has to be achieved by the portfolio company. So they're looking for partners that can bridge that and can stay with them on this and be a trusted
have the continuity.
Partner.
Thank you very much, Ronny, for your contribution. It was really insightful. I really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you, everybody, for watching, and thank you for your attention.